Okay, so people are still coming in, but I wanted to start off with a brief introduction. So this is our first Lunch and Learn for the Psychology program for spring 2021. It's the first of three. We will be having three different sessions where we provide you with information about basic skills in psychology. We'll talk about library resources today. In the next two sessions, so next week and then the week after, we're going to talk about using APA style, applying APA style to your paper. And we'll go through basic setup of your paper. We'll go through more advanced notions such as how to do headings, and we'll also talk about putting together a reference list. So today, let's go over a quick run through of what we're covering. We're going to first start off by discussing why PsycInfo is a tool that we use in psychology. Then we'll do some activities together. So we'll search for a research article. Hopefully you have received the handout. If not, you'll receive it later. That runs through what we're going to do in terms of types of searches. And while going through the searches, I'll give you some tips for narrowing your search, tips for identifying the right article for you, and also for saving it and for creating references. And then finally, we'll briefly talk about other databases and online resources. I know a lot of you like to use Google Scholar. We'll talk about when to use Google Scholar and when to stick to PsycInfo. So PsycInfo, as you may know, is going to be our primary database that we use for research in psychology. It is a database that contains articles that are exclusively from psychology as a discipline and affiliated disciplines. So you might find a little something from sociology, you might find something that could be categorized as education. As you know, there is quite a bit of overlap in the social sciences. You might also find things from neuroscience, and you'll find things from biology in some cases. PsycInfo is going to be specialized in the sources that you find. It's the one database that absolutely allows you to be sure that the article you're going to find will be pretty much appropriate to the research you're going to do. So what I would like to do today is a couple of searches in PsycInfo to help us to get a handle on really using databases appropriately and using them in a way that strengthens your searches. So there is some prerequisite knowledge that I wrote about. And so I guess prerequisite knowledge would be number one, getting to, let's try to do this together. I'm going to share my screen with you. Getting to the library page. So if you are, can you see the CUNY SPS homepage? Can everyone see that? Hopefully, yeah, thank you for the thumbs up. So we're on the CUNY SPS homepage. Some of you may have the library already bookmarked, but if you need to go through the CUNY SPS homepage, go under Student Services, click Academic Resources. You'll see there a list of resources that you should be accessing. So hopefully you're familiar with these quite a bit. And you're going to click on Library Services. So SPS uses the Newman Library. So we share that with Baruch. And you're going to click here on Newman Library. It'll take you to the Newman Library homepage. When you are at the Newman Library homepage, you're going to click on Databases. So we're clicking on Databases. We're going to go to the letter P for PsycInfo. Scrolling down, and I want to point out a few things. Okay. So a lot of students often tell me they like to use ProQuest. ProQuest can be absolutely fantastic. It's really good for finding current articles about current events. It's good for finding legal briefs, for finding a wide variety of things, but it tends to be a little bit too broad for finding research for your papers. You can use it as a supplemental tool, but I wouldn't use it as my primary search database. That's why we have psychology-specific databases. PsycArticles, which you see next, is going to be articles that are published in journals, published by the American Psychological Association. And so that's a good way to get a really narrow selection of articles. But if you want to find things from, for example, child development, or if you want to find things from other journals that have a slightly broader, more interdisciplinary appeal, you're going to go for PsycInfo, because PsycInfo isn't just psychology specifically, it is psychology and its affiliated disciplines, pretty much. Once you've clicked on PsycInfo, you get to the main search page. So we're at the main search page. If you notice here, there are going to be different dialog boxes where you can enter information, and you'll see you can select the field that you want to search. You can also select what type of connector you want to use. So a connector is basically going to be an indicator of what type of relationship you want between your search terms. One of the things I like to do before I start a search is to think about what my keywords or search terms are going to be. You could, for example, ahead of time, make up your mind that you're going to search for meditation. You could decide you're going to search for something else. And one of the things you'll often find is that in psychology, the terminology we use is not always the same as what we use in popular culture. So for example, in popular culture, when we talk about children mistreating each other and forcing each other into behaviors or teasing each other maliciously, we refer to that as bullying. In psychology, we might think of it as social exclusion. And so the term we're going to search is bullying, but we're also going to search social exclusion. It's a good idea to read up on your subject a little bit, just through a general search first, and also to sit down and find information to help you come up with keywords. In this case, what I would like to do is do a search on meditation. If you notice here, meditation comes up right away with different suggestions. So we have meditation on its own, meditation or mindfulness, meaning that we can find one or the other. Then we will have meditation and different variations on mindfulness. So I'm going to choose meditation alone, and I'm going to use this drop-down box to pick a term. Let's see. So the options are meditation and, so that would be if I wanted to do meditation plus mindfulness. Meditation or mindfulness would be using or. Meditation without mindfulness is when I would use not. I want to use and, so I'm going to enter mindfulness. And again, you see it comes up. Now, I can select the field. I could choose to do a search for alt text, for title, author, etc. I'm going to choose title, and I'm only choosing title for meditation because I want to find meditation in the title. If we notice here, there are different options for expanding and narrowing your search. The Boolean phrase search option is simply a way of having everything that is in your dialog boxes for your search. You can narrow things down for finding all of your terms and not necessarily establishing the relationship above, but allowing the search to establish a relationship. Other options. We might decide that we only want something that is peer reviewed. Now that's recommended when you are writing research papers, simply because in psychology, we tend to prefer peer-reviewed articles since they are verified as containing information that a selection of people who are experts in the field have reviewed, have been over. In terms of linked full text, that to me is an option I like to use quite a bit. And here's something else that you want to use as an option. You want to narrow the publication dates. So one rule in psychology is that typically you want to reference something that is more recent. And what we mean by recent is the past decade. So 2021 just started, so I'm going to allow us to start at 2010 instead of starting at 2011. Like that, we can get a wider range of articles. We're going to start our publication year at 2010. We're leaving the other one blank so that we're not narrowing things down, but we could narrow down from 2010 to 2015 or something of that sort. We could really just focus in on a particular article, and those options are quite useful. Now, there are other options here that you could use. You could narrow it down by a specific publication type. You can narrow it down by an age group that you're looking at. You can narrow it down by a wide variety of different things, including language. Now, most psychological literature is going to be published in English, and I think it's approximately 80% of psychological literature that's actually based on North American research. So that's something that we don't necessarily need to use as a narrower, but it'll be interesting when we find articles from different places to then make a decision about what to use, what not to use, and when to use it. You'll see this box here, it says exclude dissertations. Now, dissertations are already excluded from our search because we clicked on peer review. Dissertations are not peer reviewed. Dissertations are absolutely useful for pointing you in the right direction in terms of exploring a topic. Dissertations involve a lot of hard work and they do involve a review process, but it's not a formal review process. And in some cases, what we want to do is to wait for a dissertation to be published before we actually cite it. So instead, what we're going to do is to just look at it as a reference, look at it for information, but we're not necessarily going to cite the dissertation if we can find this information elsewhere. I'm now clicking search after having narrowed all of my search terms, and here's what we find. We find 465 results. So when I'm looking at these different results, there are a number of different things that I check for. So let's see the first one. So reducing defensive responses to thoughts of death. Yeah, we'll leave that one alone for today. Let's go to the next one. What facilitates countertransference management? Okay, not what we want. Meditation, mindfulness, and executive control, the importance of emotional acceptance and brain-based performance monitoring. This one sounds interesting, and take a look here. There are 126 references that are cited in this article. So one of the things we could do is we could actually look at the articles that this particular piece cites. So we can click here, and it would show us everything that this particular article cites. Okay, that's pretty interesting. There's a long list and goes back a little further than we might want. Another thing we can do that's pretty cool is to look at the number of times. So we can see here, times cited in the database. So this is how many times this article has been cited in the database. And we can actually click on this and see the 45 articles that cited this article. So times cited will tell you that you're looking at articles that followed this one. So it's a good way to find out what came after this particular article. How did they use this information? And that could be helpful to you in figuring out how you could use the information from the article. Okay, so we see a variety of different options, and many of them, like the original article, are available in full text form here at CUNY. Okay, so we've got our article. We're going to go with meditation, mindfulness, and executive control. We're clicking on it. We want to see if the article is appropriate for us. So one of the first things we're going to do is to read the abstract. If we read the abstract and the abstract indicates to us that it's an article that is relevant to the research that we're doing, then what we want to do is to save it. So when you're interested in the article, there are a variety of different things that you could do by way of holding on to it. Obviously, you can do the pen and paper method, but PsycInfo provides you with tools that you can actually use to make things easier. So what you can do is add it to your folder. You could print it if you wanted to. You could also email it to yourself, but I'm going to suggest starting off by adding it to your folder. Something else that I like to do is to see the citation. And if you notice here, you click on Cite, and you're going to see in the citation that they have different ways of citing the article. So we'll take a look. Okay, so here's APA, American Psychological Association. So that's going to be the way we cite things in psychology. We write according to rules that are established by the APA. And you can copy and paste this and copy and paste it into a document. You can email it to yourself directly from the PsycInfo database. There's a wide variety of different ways that you can use this particular information. You can also export references to a reference management software program that you might be using. Some of us like to do things manually. Other people like other software programs. I occasionally use EndNote, but I tend to like to do things manually because it allows you a little bit of control. And it's also the old school way, which sometimes can feel quite good. Now, in terms of once you have the article, you've added it to the folder. What you can do then is click on the folder when you're done, and you'll see the entries. So when you're in your folder, you have a number of different options. One option is to email it to yourself. Another option is to save it. Let's click on the email option. And when you click in the email option, you get even more possibilities for dealing with this reference. The first is going to be that you can add a citation format. You can add the citation, you can email that to yourself. So we're emailing it to ourselves in APA format. You could also ask for other information. And there's a wide variety of different ways that you can send this to yourself. Plain text, you can send it to yourself in rich text. If you are working with multiple people, you can email it to yourself and to other people you're working with. Let's say you have a group project for class, you can email it to several different people. The reference option is obviously a really good one, but something you want to be careful with is that automatically generated references sometimes contain errors. I know I had a few students point out to me last semester that there were a couple of errors in the automatically generated one. So that's a reason to come to our next Lunch and learn about how to check references and make sure that they are acceptable. What I'd like to do now is another search. So we're clicking on new search, and we're going to try some slightly different terms. And I want to show you a couple of tricks. So for example, let's say you want to look at COVID-19. And you see here, there are these different options where you can use different connectors, the OR connector. So you could do COVID-19 or coronavirus or 2019 nCoV or SARS-CoV-2. Let's do that. So we could have all these options. And then I want to look at COVID-19 and say COVID-19 and parents. But what I want to do is possibly look at parenting, possibly look at other things having to do with family. So I'm going to add an asterisk after the T of parent. And what the asterisk will do is give me every different possible variation of the word parent. So I'll get parent, parents, parenting, parental, and now I'm hitting search. Okay, so I've got my different search results. Let's look through them, see if they're of interest to us. So what if, let's say, we wanted to narrow this search even further? We only want things from 2021. Then what we would do is go here, enter 2021, hit enter, it updates, and here we go. So now it's only 2021, and you see there are 54 articles on parental worry, COVID-19, and you see all the different versions of parenting that I mentioned are here. You can narrow things down further by picking only academic journals. That's a pretty good idea to only pick academic journals, although something to keep in mind is that there are quite a few book chapters that will be of use that might address COVID-19. And there are also going to be government reports, but we'll talk about that during a future session, government reports and how to find them. So I'm now going to address a few of your questions before we move on to something else, because I see there are a number of questions in the chat. And I see in the chat questions, which version of APA references is this? It doesn't specify, it's APA 7. So that's APA 7. All of these databases, specifically PsycInfo and PsycArticles, are going to be up to date, and they're going to be in APA 7 as far as the version goes. Now, in terms of other questions, yeah, these different tips and tools, as Dr. Marquez Lewis said, these different tips can be used for other databases, not just for PsycInfo. Something to keep in mind for those of you who are in developmental, you might be using ERIC, which is for education research specifically. There's a possibility that you might be using anthropology databases, you might be using sociology databases. There's a wide variety of different databases out there. It's really about thinking about what your topic is and what's relevant to your exploration of the topic. And the more you read, the better off you are in many cases. So what I would actually do is ahead of time, do some prep work, sit down, figure out what the topic you want to cover is and where you really need to search. Start with PsycInfo as your first place, and then move on to something else as your second option. So in terms of, yes, you can export your references to other databases. Now, in terms of preferences for articles, there are no real preferences other than that they be peer reviewed. Now, obviously, there are differences between journals. Some journals are slightly more reputable than others, but typically, if you find something in PsycInfo, then it's legit. If you find it in PsycInfo and it's peer reviewed, it's legit and it's something that's worth citing. And that's something to always keep in mind. You're not going to worry necessarily about how long the article is, but you're going to worry about its content and you're going to worry about how recent it is. Now, one of the reasons we want something more recent is because we want to ensure that the topic is still relevant. You might find a fantastic article from 1972, and it might be something that comes in handy. But what you want to make sure is that this topic has been explored since 1972 so that you know that this topic is still relevant. And you want to explore broadly to start and then gradually narrow things down, because as you gradually narrow things down, you'll get more specialized information and information that will assist you more directly. Sometimes it takes more than one search session. I know some of you are thinking, oh no, we have to sit down at a computer and look at library stuff for hours. And yes, you do. And the reason you're doing that is because you want your sources to be solid. You don't want it to be that you're referencing an article and the person who is grading your paper or reading your paper then says to you, that article doesn't say that. You want it to be that the information you have is accurate, that it supports your point, or that the point you're making is supported by research, and that you have multiple sources in many cases. Very often students will write something like, multiple research articles show X, Y, and Z, and then they have one reference. If you say multiple, that means several, so that means you have to have several references. And that's where PsycInfo comes in handy, because you can find associated articles. So here we have this article on sleep preschoolers during COVID-19. If you notice here, there are no articles that are listed as articles that it is linked to. And that's partially because it was published February 2021. But what you can do is use the subjects or keywords here and use them to do research on the topic. So if you don't find something right away that is immediately relevant, or that is immediately a follow-up or a source, you can still use the information. So again, we are now in the 2021. I'm going to broaden our search so I can show you a few more things. But the asterisk trick is absolutely worth using. There are quotations that you could use. So you could, for example, use quotes having to do with, let's say, emotional development. We can put this in quotation marks. And I'll take questions now.
Dr. Alicia, we had a question in the chat about whether or not we could connect the articles to Zotero.org.
You can export articles to just about any database, and you can also download them and then re-upload them elsewhere. But yes, you can absolutely export the articles to other data management services or article management, reference management services.
Okay, and it looks like we had one more question here. Is an encyclopedia ever a good source, particularly for definitions to include in a paper?
Okay, so in terms of psychology papers, an encyclopedia would be a good source for your understanding. Now, there are specific encyclopedias so for example, there's an encyclopedia of adolescent development, and you're going to have encyclopedias that are specifically related to psychology, and those can be good sources. But what you want to keep in mind is that there are very few instances where you need to provide a definition. So you can cite an encyclopedia, but you want to be cautious, and you especially do not want to use quotes, because we don't use direct quotes in psychology too much. But yes, but there are encyclopedias of different that cover different topics that are related to psychology. The APA has different encyclopedias that it publishes. So yes, those can be good sources, but the best sources to support your points will be peer-reviewed articles. Something else that students often use is going to be textbooks. Textbooks are occasionally good sources, but they're acceptable sources at the undergraduate level. Once you are in a master's program, they're not necessarily as acceptable because you're expected to use primary sources as opposed to secondary sources, and a textbook is always a secondary source. So there's another question. Can we add the type of statistical data we're trying to learn in search method? Yes. So you can add specifically, let's say you specifically want to find regression analyses, or you want to find ANOVAs that are connected to the topic. You can hit search and see if there are any. Narrows down just one. But again, we're still early in the COVID-19 research era, although there's quite a bit that's coming. But yeah, you can enter terms for what type of stats you want to see and take a look at them. And one of the things that's really handy is actually looking at articles so that you can learn about what statistical technique is useful when and how. Let me see final questions, since we are almost out of time. And I guess we are out of time now. Thank you for coming to the Lunch and Learn. There will be a specific Lunch and Learn about how to do citations. We will have the Lunch and Learn next time will cover references in general. And then in terms of when to cite, how to cite, paraphrasing, all of that, we will cover that in an upcoming Lunch and Learn down the line. So thank you so much for coming. I look forward to seeing your questions, and I also hope you'll join us for our next session.